That'll make any bit of a difference. Probably not. Holy shit, I'm tired. But unfortunately, I was not beneficial with my time management. So now I am, as they say, behind the 8-ball and totally fucked up the ass. Has anybody seen a remote? Anyway, welcome back to the live stream, the most boring live stream in the world. Tonight I'll be listening to something and working on something while pretending my life isn't slowly spiraling out of control. Where the fuck is the remote? Seriously, I just had it here. I didn't go anywhere. I have nowhere else to go in this world. Oh, Mom picked up my teeth for me. How nice. It must have been glowing all night and bothering her. Seriously, where's the remote? Oh. Aw. Mommy cleaned it up for me. I think she tried to anyway and just said fuck it and put everything down and walked away. I don't blame her. That is a normal reaction for this place. And my stuff, which is always a mess. Oh, my throat's sore. Mom just got over a cold, but I don't know, you know, what kind it was. Oh, those who run. Let's try this one for a bit. Not my favorite voice, but see how it goes.
Thinks Volkswagens are expensive to maintain.
Okay.
But they're
I need to figure out your color.
affordable.
You're gonna get a base, and then we're gonna work on other
He
things.
also thinks the milk is still perfectly fine. So maybe don't listen to him. See the numbers for yourself at VW.ca.
And I got this now. Not sure what to do with it, but I have it.
It is important to understand
We'll figure that
that
out
the
then.
Great Confederation is not a benevolent organization. Neither is it particularly wicked. It is not built to be good, although it certainly strives to do so. It is not built to be bad, although many of its laws and policies have been twisted to perform acts of shocking cruelty. It is built primarily to endure, to stand as a bulwark against barbarism and anarchy, and as such it is astoundingly effective. In its endurance, the Confederation has acquired millennia of customs, rituals and traditions that trail in the wake of its stately passage through the ages. Its bureaucrats spend thankless lifetimes wading through the morass. It could be argued that as superfluous as so many of these traditions seem, they serve to give the institution a certain inertia that holds it as steady as any treaties or threat of arms. It is one of our most ancient traditions that concerns us today, and its curious history with one of the Confederation's most recent members. When humanity finally breached the limits of its modest empire, and became known to the galaxy's most esteemed institution, we told them our curious tradition. When a new race joins the ranks of the Great Confederation, it is customary to adopt an epithet suited to its particular qualities. Each name is a point of pride. It speaks to a race's history, not only that of its civilizations, but of its evolution itself. What gave it the strength to drag itself from the morass of base life up to the stars? The names are not complex and follow a basic scheme. The brachiating Flower, whose spindly towers reach almost as high as their ambitions, became those who climb. The staunch Modolo, who grew from nomadic herds to travelling cities to armoured drifter fleets, took the name Those Who Wander in Strength. The telepathic hive mind of the Briquette, working in perfect synchronicity, adopted Those Who Are One. It's a foolish tradition, as so many are. But just like so many others, there dwells in it a curious truth. A name is a promise, after all, and a warrior of those who die gloriously is likely to go down fighting for little more reason than to maintain the reputation of their species. More than anything, it displays the qualities a race is most proud of, or most aspires to. They are those who say it oversimplifies, or pigeonholes, or grandstands, but the tradition has held firm through thousands of cycles of peace and strife alike. So in spite of its antiquated roots, the topic of which name the humans would choose dominated Confederation discussion for sub-cycles on end. Not merely a rich vein of gossip, their choice would glean valuable insight for diplomacy, trade agreements, and the entertainment industry. Those who approach with caution are hardly going to be pulled in by gambling advertisements, after all. The humans made their decision with an almost indecent haste. After only a handful of cycles, their representative took his place at the Confederation Senate to be formally inducted among our ranks. Call us, they said, those who run. It was a title that reignited gossip for cycles to come. Biologically, it made sense. The upright primates were certainly built for running, not with any particular speed, but with a casual lope that seemed to serve their purpose. But there were 1,000 others they might have picked. What kind of species names itself a cowardice? What kind of promise does that make? The following cycles only served to reinforce the opinion. The Terrans proved to be a race unusually adverse to conflict. Where others would fight, they negotiated. Where others would seize, they gave ground. When pushed to a fight, placed between hammer and anvil, they always managed to squeeze out and find some kind of peaceful resolution. This manner gathered them many friends, but few allies. Who could rely on a craven to support them in crisis where no peace could be found? When the time came to take a stand, who could trust in those who run? Perhaps it was the name that encouraged the Larashi in the end. No species enjoyed such a controversial place in the Confederation as the Larashi. Time and again, they have sparked conflict and chaos for their own gain. Time and again, they have proven their worth when the Confederation needs the proper application of brute force. Their evolution as apex pack predators is reflected in their lightning-fast attack fleets and cutthroat politicking. One way or another, the Larashi have well earned their epithet of those who scourge. It is perhaps unfair to judge every individual of a species by their race's reputation. Certainly there have been Larashi known for their kindness, their forgiveness, and hundreds of cycles with the Confederation might have distanced them from their most savage practices. But a name is a promise, after all. Historians across the galaxy can appreciate the difficulty in pinning down the root cause of any particular conflict. The Larashi were certainly looking to expand their holdings. The virgin Terran territories were mightily tempting. But the Larashi royal family was also facing dissent within its aristocracy, was in need of a common cause to unify the ranks. And of course, their economic power had diminished through a number of recent trade sanctions, and they ached for a chance to remind the Confederation of their military strength. But it could also be argued that the Larashi had simply done it to many fleshly races before, and were more than happy to do so again. Those of us sympathetic to the humans realized too late the careful web the Larashi had drawn them into over 100 minor disputes. Certainly the Terrans had no idea. They had been in the Confederation a scant handful of cycles. The Larashi had navigated its legal morass for centuries. They fitted humanity's noose with grace. If the Larashi had merely declared war on the Terrans, we might have blunted the blow. There are a number of Confederation bylaws and procedures in place for those kinds of things. Ones that the victims of the Larashi have relied on in past conflicts, amnesty, rules of engagement, foreign aid, and the like. But this was different. The ritual is known as Corral. It pits one Confederation member against another, with no aid or intervention from other members. In theory, it allows the resolution of disputes without setting off a powder keg of alliances and counter-alliances. In practice, it is used most often to cut a vulnerable race out from the herd. It is a savage tradition from the early, cutthroat days of the Confederation. But as has been said before, age lends inertia to tradition, and it has proven frustratingly difficult to root out. To declare Corral requires highly specific conditions to be met, ones the Larashi have carefully engineered. Every conflict formed a piece of an elaborate picture framing the Terrans as unjust aggressions, and the Larashi as the victims, on paper at least. And in an institution so woefully hidebound as the Confederation, paper was the most effective witness. When every piece had been placed, all that was left was the official declaration of war, which they proceeded to do with gusto and aplomb. On the floor of the Confederation Congress, under the eyes of 1,000 delegates, the Terran senator begged the Larashi to reconsider.
Don't do this.
They were a fledgling strength, he said. This war and all that happened next would define the future of both races. The Larashi senator laughed in his face. A laugh from those who scourge and knows everyone else in the room. Few predators manage to ascend to sentience, and the sight of their cruel, sharp teeth stirs primal fears long buried beneath the veneer of civilization. He drew forth an elaborate scroll, the official declaration of war, and cast it at the Terran's feet. He spoke the ancient challenge. Corral, he said. Embrace us not. Our gifts are blazed now, and cut at your hands. Call not your allies, their doors are closed to you. Soon off returns, they shall be denied. Flee to your dens, gather your strength, and make your stand. We are coming. The Terrans had a modest fleet, capable of chasing off pirates on their trade routes. And of course, as soon as war had been declared, they began the long process of water production. Factories not used since before humanity's unification cranked into life. But it would be long cycles before they could form defenses across their worlds. And the Larashi had long planned for this war. Indeed, their stockpiling of military assets were the subject of one of their many political conflicts with the humans. Until they could properly mobilize, the Larashi had their pick of the Terran territories. The only question was, which planet would they hit first? The Cornico stars were a tempting choice. They lay closest to the Larashi territory and would make a fine addition to their holdings. But they were virgin ground, underdeveloped. They could be claimed in time, after they had broken the back of the Terran defenses. Earth itself was tempting as well. The loss of a race's homeworld would be a tremendous blow, one that has sent many an empire on a slow spiral to extinction. But humanity was well aware of this vulnerability and had prepared accordingly. More than a quarter of their forces were positioned to defend their home system. The Larashi could take it, eventually, but the losses would be tremendous. They needed a symbol, something that would shatter humanity's resolve in a swift, singular strike. Something they did not defend properly. Something they took for granted so much that they could not imagine its loss. It might have taken years to find. But, as has been said, they had long planned for this war. Humanity's homeworld was still slowly healing from the eruption of their desperate climb to the stars. It would take hundreds of cycles to scrub the poison from its seas and skies. Now they were wiser. Their new worlds were developed with a careful eye on their ecosystems. But even among its harmonic compatriots, Avalon stood apart. Avalon was their chance to be better. The citizens of its cities were wardens of the planet, not its rulers. The trees stood tall, the animals roamed free, and the fields of tall grasses stretched from one horizon to the other. The planet stood as a symbol of everything the Terrans aspired to. Or at least, it did. Those who Scourge defended upon Avalon like wolves of the fold. For the first time, his residents looked up to see fire in the night sky, as lasers seared through the meager defenses. The Terrans fought with courage, ferocity, and desperation. It didn't matter. Within hours, the Larashi had taken the planet. They might have abducted the native humans, shipped them off a chapel. They might have hung their banners from their city walls, taken their forts, looted their treasures. Those who Scourge might have chased off those who run, and ruled comfortably over their new holdings. But a name is a promise, after all. They took no captives on Avalon. They claimed no prizes, landed no colonists, plundered no resources. They glassed the cities with plasma bombardment and set the very atmosphere ablaze. The fields and forests burned, the seas boiled, and the animals within them died bewildered to their fate. Humanity's shining jewel was left a black, lifeless rock. The Larashi made an example of the world. It taught the Terrans a lesson. There was no act taboo under Corral. The only hope of humanity's survival lay in unconditional surrender. The counterattack was inevitable. The Larashi had cut humanity to the quick. There would be a single furious retaliation, lashing out at their hurt. But it would be the fury of a wounded beast. The next strike would be weaker, and the next weaker still. Those who Scourge had evolved from deadly predators, roaring at the flanks of larger prey until they collapsed. This kind of war was second nature. So the human assault on the Larashi stronghold of Akalat was hardly unexpected, nor was its ferocity. The scale of the attack, however, merited comment. The Terran military was a paltry thing, stretched thin to cover their merchant fleets, but now it was the Valklat's turn to look up at the night sky as if filled with 1,000 new stars. No guardians of the merchant fleets these, but the fleet itself. Cargo haulers, mining ships, tuggers, now crudely mounted with whirling rotary cannons, single-shot railguns, and cheap missiles. The Larashi, proud warrior fetishists of the military elite, learned the human term that day, technicals. They also learned the effectiveness of weapons that are not weapons. Rivet guns, plasma cutters, and mining drills seem hardly practical for the purposes of warfare. But when a Larashi battlecruiser is swarmed by a half-dozen ships with empty magazines and fried railgun coils, charging at the larger prey to warriors' flanks, the Yeoman falters at about the same time as the fuel tanks. Akalat was a fortified planet. Its forces were formidable, its captain seasoned. Within a single subcycle, it had fallen. To those it had scorned as warriors. To forces it had never even considered a threat. To those who run. This, in itself, was not extraordinarily worrying. The Larashi military theory is aggressive to a fault. They put little faith in defense. They had lost ground, but they would soon make it up, and more besides. The Terran spirit being broken, they would take the next planet with ease. Except they didn't. They sent their fleet to Mead, the mercantile planet, to swallow the world in 1,000 mouths. But at Mead, they were glutted, choked, suffocated by 10,000, and now the Terrans had taken Rokosha, the Larashi breadbasket. They tried a daring lightning strike at Porte, the Terran warp hubway station, to hobble their forces. But at Porte, they were turned aside, and then the humans had claimed the shipping yards of Barakeen, and the Larashi found themselves hobbled. They burned the technicals in droves, but now the humans were manufacturing true battleships, faster than anyone could have imagined, and they were terrors. The Larashi were masters of war. They had sneered at the crudely rigged merchant vessels, but now they could appreciate these new ships with an expert's eye. They traced the cruel, graceful lines of the prows. They admired the engines, envied the shields that shrugged off their fire, feared the searing lasers that tore their own apart. At every battlefield, the Larashi looked upon those ships and measured their own destruction to the erg. On the floor of the Confederation Congress, the Larashi senator called for a new motion. His bearing was still proud, his sneer unyielding, but there was a hesitance to him, an uncertainty that had not been there before. He called the Terran senator to the floor. This war had cost both factions, he said, and the Larashi had proven their point. The ritual of Corral would be called off. Those who scourged would withdraw their fleets, the Terrans would return to their systems, and 1,000 Confederation subcommittees would swoop in to provide aid to the war-torn nations. It was a good deal. Those who run had proven themselves unexpectedly vicious in battle, and had expanded their holdings considerably from the conflict. Few fledgling races had managed to hold their own against those who scourge, and none of them had actually claimed territory in the process. Already, a number of nations offered their allyship to the small race, eager to recruit those deadly ships for their own purposes. But small they still were, a mere fraction of their aggressors, and no amount of tactical ingenuity or sheer righteous fury could close that gap. Those who run had stung the beast and turned it from its path, but they could not hope to maintain their success against the Larashi fighting to defend their heartlands. The deal they offered was the only real option. Under the eyes of 1,000 delegates, the Terran senator approached the Larashi. He drew a small scrap of fabric forth from his uniform. As he slowly unfolded the charred fragment, we realized what it was. Pulled from an expanse of blackened stone and glass, stretching from one horizon to the other. All that was left of the flag of Avalon. He cast it at the Larashi senator's feet. Corral, he said. The blade cuts both ways. You began the ritual, you shall see it finished. Call not your allies, their doors are closed to you now. Soon not for terms, they shall be denied. Flee to your dens, gather your strength, and make your stand. We are coming. The war continued. The Larashi tried every war trick they had learned in 1,000 lifetimes. They laid elaborate traps, picked away at Terran fleets, made glorious last stands. The ships of humanity, dreadful dreadnoughts as they were, could still be tricked, trapped, dragged down by numbers. Their burnt-out husks became a common sight among the Larashi territories. But it was never enough. The Terrans laid traps of their own, fought as well as those who scourge. Every Terran ship the Larashi burned took a score with them. More than that was their sheer, overwhelming relentlessness. No matter how many were killed, more came in an endless tide, ravaging those who run, those who scourge had stumbled across something completely unexpected, an equal in war, perhaps a superior. And that was the true tragedy to the Larashi. If they had nurtured the humans, joined forces, they might have taken on the Confederation itself, but in their pride they had wounded the beast, and now felt the full measure of his claws. Slowly, quietly, we and the other nations withdrew our offers of allyship to the Terrans. We had mourned them as victims, rooted for them as underdogs. Now we fear them as monsters. But lately we remembered what the Terran ambassador had said. This war, and all that happened next, would define the future of both races. We remembered how desperately he had played for peace. Only now do we realize what exactly he had tried to hold back. The war continued. The Terrans cut a hole into the Larashi territories and poured into the wounded in droves. Those who scourged could not stop them, any more than they could stop the moons in their orbits. Humanity did not scourge the planets they captured. They merely burned their shipyards and launching zones, crippled their ability to mobilize, and moved on. As they blazed a line across the planets, their aim became clear. Nothing less than the Larashi homeworld itself, Catalant. The story of its fall threatens to become repetitive, an echo of every battle before it, differing only in its tremendous scale. The Larashi fought with courage, ferocity, and desperation. It was not enough. On and on they came, till Catanan's low orbit filled with charred metal and flesh. When the dawn rose on the Larashi's ancient homeworld, the sun shone haphazardly, filtered through the thick haze of war debris, and it dawned on the Terran flag. The war continued. Catanan was theirs. They had cut the Larashi to the quick. There was a furious counterattack, of course, but it was the fury of a wounded beast. The next strike was weaker, and the one after that. They were bleeding out now, on a slow spiral to extinction. But the Terrans were not content to wait. They had taken the homeworld, true, but they did not hold a planet responsible for the genocide of Avalon. Nor did they blame the entirety of the Arashi race for the war crime. No, they knew where to lay that blame. The Arashi royal family, whose word had been law for time immemorial. It was on their orders that Avalon burned. Bringing them to justice, however, proved difficult. Before the first Terran ship appeared in Catanan's skies, the royal family had quietly slipped away to a neighboring system. Their absence was not lost on the planet's defenders. Indeed, it was not an inconsiderable factor in their defeat. Still, humanity had been denied their true goal. So they took that system too. Once more the nobility fled, and once more the Terrans followed. When that system had been taken in turn, the royal family split for better chances. Some disguised themselves and hid among the Larashi populace. Some paid enormous bribes to other nations to take them in violation of the ancient ritual. Some sought refuge with the pirates in the outer fringes, who paid no lip service to Corral. Still, humanity did not relent. When brute force did not suffice, they turned to cunning. Their agents infiltrated their havens, and tracked down each offending member with an ability that bordered on the uncanny. Those hiding amongst their own were extracted. The nations sheltering them were confronted, threatened with exposure unless they were surrendered. Still, brute force had a use. At the fringes of known space, the Terrans ravaged the outlaw fleets with a cruelty that those who scourged could respect. They had started the war fighting pirates. Now, in its waning days, they found themselves fighting them once more. But now they wielded an intent and fury the outlaws had never seen. Their every hidden holdout was rooted out and burned. It wasn't long before they gave up the nobles to send the bloodshed. And even still, the war continued. The last free member of the Larashi royal family, the son of the ruling king, fled to the last holdout he had. The planet Ublot, whose unique ionic atmosphere shorted out any technology more advanced than a sharpened stick. His ship fried to a dead hulk, his tools destroyed. He landed on Ublot's surface with nothing but a parachute and his skin. A one-way trip in every sense. But that was all right. He was of those who scourge, evolved to take his place at the top of the food chain. Ublot was a world dominated by dry, wind-scoured plains. The game could be found if one knew where to look. He could survive here, a banished prince, and give a shred of his pride. The Terrans would not dare chase into Ublot. Any who came after him would not be returning. They would have to content themselves with leaving him in exile. He held that certainty close to him. It warmed him on cold nights, gave him comfort in isolation. It kept him going for almost a full cycle, right up until he saw the Terran ship descending and felt it whimper in his chest. The ship crashed, as they always did. But like the prince, his pilot landed safely. A single human female, bringing nothing more than her flight suit and a single knife. She looked at the wreckage of her ship, her only hope of a journey home. Then she turned towards the endless plains, and she began to run. There are stories told of the long chase between those who scourge and those who run. Were we in a more romantic age, it would have been the stuff of myths. As it were, it was relegated merely to historical archives and melodrama. It went on for cycles. A planet is an unfathomably large span to travel on foot, and even though the Terran had landed as close to the Larashi ship as she could, then reduced it to merely a fraction of unfathomable. She had no devices with which to trace the prince, no vehicle, no medicine. But then again, neither did he. The Larashi are ambush predators, built for quick bursts of speed. They explode out at their prey, or claws and teeth, for that one short chase that determines life or death. A slow Larashi can outpace a fast human on their worst day. But humans are not built for bursts of speed. They are built for endurance, a fact the prince slowly became aware of over his endless flight. The Terran ran slowly, but she simply didn't stop. The Larashi ran as far as his aching legs could take him. But every time he stopped to rest, the distance between them closed. He simply could not escape her. Neither could he evade her. He used the ancient tricks of the wild, crossing streams, avoiding soft ground, doubling back. He laid traps for the human, which is as much ingenuity as he could conjure, but none of it worked. She could trace him by the bending of twigs, a scent in the wind. She saw through his traps as though she had laid them herself. The Terrans had chosen their hunter with care. The Larashi prince, apex predator that he was, soon learned a human term: persistence hunting. Perhaps if he had faced her directly, he might have defeated her. At the end of things, he was still a killer by nature, and she with no more weapons than a knife. But his courage was gone, his pride broken, his homeland taken, his nation conquered. He could not hope to defeat her, any more than his species could have defeated hers. In the end, all he could do was run, and she was much better at that. The Terran occupied every waking moment of his thoughts. He could not escape her in his dreams. Closer and closer she came, until he ran himself ragged, until he crawled desperately through the desert, and finally collapsed. When she finally arrived and put the knife to his throat, he was almost grateful. 10 years to the day, the Terran ship had crashed on Ublos shores. A hole opened up in the planet's protective ionosphere. Not for long, barely time enough for a small craft to descend to the surface and return. But even as it touched down, two figures could be seen: a human and her Larashi captive, arriving at the predetermined landing site. The technology to defy Ublos' particular prisoner's atmosphere is not beyond imagination. It could be achieved by a vast team of scientists with the proper motivation. But it is an extraordinary expenditure of time and resources to capture a single individual. It seemed a fitting capstone for humanity's most revealing conflict, the lengths to which they would go to avenge their injustices. And at last, the war ended. We watched in dread fascination as the humans determined the fate of the Larashi. The race was entirely at their mercy. They might claim their entire territory as a prize of war, or make vassals of them. Then again, enslaving the entire population was not out of the question, nor was a complete extermination. No act was taboo and to corral, and the Terrans had proved themselves a merciless species. But the humans did none of these. They imprisoned the royal family on charges of war crimes. They were shipped to the ruins of Avalon. Already the humans had begun the arduous process of recultivating life on the ruined planet. Already the first basic phages had begun to grow amid the glass and ash. It would take more than 1,000 cycles before the planet regained its former glory. But the Larashi royals would work its earth their entire lives to quicken the process. The remaining nobility, those who were too tenuous a connection to claim complicity for Avalon, were gathered at Catalan. The Larashi, whose royal dynasty stretched back, unbroken, through its entire recorded history, learned a human term that day: Balkanization. Their mighty kingdom was splintered into a dozen minor nations, whose petty feuds and infighting would undermine any attempt at a unified front. And like that, those who scourge would pose no more threat to any race. Perhaps someday a strong enough personality might unite the kingdoms once more. But it would be many cycles in the future. They would think hard before attacking the humans again. On the floor of the Confederation, the Terran senator submitted a motion long in the making. The war had gone on long enough, he said, and they had proven that point. Corral would be ended. Age could be given. The 12 new Larashi subdelegates raised no objections. In the hours afterwards, I had an opportunity to meet with the Terran ambassador over refreshments. Had his species barely won the conflict, he might have been sworn than minors and sycophants. But their overwhelming onslaught had earned more fear than respect, and so he sat alone. I summoned courage and approached him. He, in turn, welcomed the company. "You're braver than most," he said. "Before, we were weak, and I had many friends. But now we are strong, and I foresee a lonely future." "Can you blame us?" I said. "We never could have imagined what you were capable of." "We haven't had to be warriors for a very long time," he said. "But we never forgot how. A name is a promise, after all." "Those who run?" He laughed. "Not quite," he said. "That was a mistranslation from a malfunctioning device. By the time we realized the error, it seemed too trivial to correct." "A mistranslation?" He smiled, and for the first time I noticed the sharp teeth in the corners of his mouth. "It's not those who run," he said. "It's those who chase."
Translation. My apologies. Okay, so we have this lovely lady, and I'm thinking the bat skull head would be a lovely addition. I was thinking like that, but it does need a little bit of a neck, I think. Yeah, I accidentally broke her head getting her off, so I'm gonna have to repaint the body. That happens. And I gotta get some
Life
lights
is
in
more than
there.
one round. Go the whole damn distance.
Okay.
All right, Explorer. Grams of protein, and now we ask.
It was policy that when conducting first contact with a new sapient species,
So should
that
chase.
an ambassador of each species with a seat in the Galactic Coalition, the GC, as she was put it, be present. The GC and humanity distinctly remembered their day of first contact. When the alien races arrived with an armada, humanity thought they were there to invade. But the aliens instead sent a terrified transmission, begging to be spared of humanity's nuclear and fission armaments, pleading that we would not obliterate them, as our many simulations depicted, they were referring to movies, and instead conduct peaceful diplomacy. It was a riot for the whole planet. Humans still enjoy rewatching it on visualizers from time to time. But that was a while ago. Today, humanity was just another seat in the GC. Granted, they were still known as one of the most dangerous and volatile species on it in both culture and biology, but now that just amounted to an increased insurance rate for ships with humans aboard, rather than quiet yelps of terror each time one walked by. Usually the benefits of human strength, resilience, and ingenuity outweigh this increase. However, it still made the necessity of a human ambassador on first contact missions a matter of debate. The intent of first contact missions was to represent all the species in the GC, but it was also to show that the GC wasn't a threat. It was an open-handed invitation. Putting a human on the first contact shuttle was like putting a gun in their hand. Even if everyone in the GC knew that the gun wasn't actually loaded, the species being made contact with didn't. And humanity's forward-facing predatory eyes, their absurdly dense musculature, their flesh-eating diet, and stiff bipedal posture, made for a very big gun. Because of this,
Hello.
Ambassador
How you
Julian
doing
Marshall
tonight?
has spent every first contact mission making himself as small
I
and
made
not
this.
graphic as possible. But half the time, they just made the new species worry about the appearance of a stalking predator.
The arm
It
fell
reached
off.
the
I could
point
stick
where
that
the
back
most
on, but I put on the
way
dragon
to
tail.
assure the new species that humanity in the GC wasn't a threat to
And I
them
put on the head.
was the
So I
Julians
gotta
away
paint
from the
her.
ship
She'll be
until
ready to
the other
go.
ambassadors had done all the work.
And I
They
broke this
introduced the human
one,
ambassador
so
from
I just
a
put
safe
another
distance.
dinosaur head on it.
And so it was that Julian was currently reclined in the rather cramped deck
I have
of
a
the
sore
ship,
throat.
filling away at his
And I'm gonna put
awaiting
a,
the others to finish
one
the
of those
job he'd trained
Halloween
his whole life for,
bats.
his newest first
I'll
contact
put that
mission.
on there.
He didn't have to wait long.
I need to wait a few days so I can get some more
Yeah,
epoxy. Should be in at the end of the week, I hope.
And the other 23 ambassadors rushed inside with terrible looks on their faces, practically running each other over in their haste. Why weren't we warned of this? How did we even discover this species? Cried Borlak, Wimyu ambassador, and the ship's captain by seniority. His six feelers thrashed wildly in a show of panic. They found us. They sent an ether wave transmission and told us where to find our world and requested first contact. That's it, no official data. Shouted back Kick Nick with 12 wide eyes. This was a mistake, despaired Filler, her watery form slowly sinking further into her bulky atmospheric regulator. We can't go back there. What's going on? Julian Foley cried out, standing up and almost hitting his head on the deck's roof. What happened? The human, called Biffy. We can send the human out. No way, protested Borlak. Not even a human would stand a chance against that. Those things make humans look like Krythons. No offense, Filler. Filler had already sank into a helpless puddle in her atmospheric regulator and couldn't respond. Julian was shocked. All humans knew that they were the equivalent of space orcs to other species, and Vorlak had just claimed that this new species made them look like a semi-rigid water-based organism. If humans were space orcs, what must this new species be? Julian swallowed a lump that had formed in his throat. Surely Vorlak had to be exaggerating, and yet the other ambassadors were nodding in agreement. Well, what do they look like? Julian asked, morbid curiosity taking hold. Kicknick handed him a visualizer. Leave it to the 12-eye Cynatori to capture visual data, even as they were fleeing in panic. Julian braced himself to see something straight out of ancient Lovecraftian mythos. When the visualizer turned on, his lips twitched into a smile he simply couldn't hold back. Oh, I'm going out there, he declared. Human, did my translator identify excitement in your voice? Vorlak gasped. Don't worry, I'll be right back, Julian waved back, still beaming. What Vorlak had said about him not standing a chance against the species he saw in the visualizer was true, but there was no way he was going home without meeting it in person. It was a short walk from the landing pad to the enormous conference tent that had been set up for the first contact. When Julian walked in, he tilted his head back to look up at the species and really take it in. The smile still on his face. Oh, this one's new. And he isn't immediately running and screaming like the rest of them. That's a relief. But he's barely any larger than them. Are we sure this isn't just how their species exhibits fear? Julian spoke up. Apologies on my companion's behalf, they scare quite easily. You must admit, though, that you are quite a terrifying sight for ones of such smaller size, and without the teeth, claws, and spines you display. There, see? He's just as scared, if a bit braver. Oh, not at all, Julian corrected, still beaming at the sight before him. I wouldn't have missed this meeting for the world. And yet you lack all the features you just attributed to us. So why is it you are not afraid? Does your species lack fear? No, we have it, Julian answered. But you actually bear a striking resemblance to a creature that humans, my species, tell fantastic stories of. Really? And what do you call these creatures in your stories? Julian couldn't help but let out an abrupt laugh at his remarkable position. Everyone back on Earth was going to lose it when this species got formally introduced at the GC. You look an awful lot like what we call dragons.
I'm working on a dragon.
The first contact mission was a success, to the disbelief of all 23 other ambassadors. At their formal introduction, it was unanimously decided that humans would be the ones to act as guides, to show these new dragons the ropes of the GC and interacting with freighter races, and their fears. Even the human representative had voted for themselves, much to all the others' dismay. None of them could fathom how humanity could possibly be so excited to interact with a species that made even them seem frail. But needless to say, it was never again questioned the necessity of a human ambassador. Do you really just sit in here practically the whole time while the others go out and do the actual introductions? Asked Phyla Namitar, the newest ambassador to join the Galactic Coalition's first contact team. Yep, answered human ambassador Julian Rushford. Last time was the exception. Last time, it had been first contact with Phyla species, who bore a remarkable resemblance to Earth mythology dragons, and as such, only the human had dared get anywhere near them. The official name for their species, much like the one of the ambassador Julian was speaking with, was a lengthy and hard to pronounce one. Geros Foliantival. So it came as no surprise that when the humans simply refused to call them anything but dragons, the nickname stuck. Before the dragons, the humans and their homeworld that was harsh enough to give rise to such a species were both considered anomalies. Now that there was another like them, to surpass their meaning, such civilizations needed to be categorized. And so it was that the Space Orcs and Space Dragons were both labeled Death Warders. That's ridiculous, protested Frilla, as Julian called her. The whole point is showing new species we aren't a threat. How are we going to do that if we're hiding like predators in ambush? Julian explained his many attempts at an alternative approach, simply waiting for the others to smooth everything over first, and then introduced the human from afar after. At least I have you to socialize with. How did you manage it on your own? She asked. Usually playing games on my holophone, he answered with a yawn and a stretch of his arms. If nothing else, the requirement to double the floor and ceiling space in the ship to accommodate the Dragon Ambassador was a much welcome change to the prior, crowded ship that had been made before the humans joined the GC. Apparently when the GC first formed, first contacts with new species only occurred every century or so, but these days, with so many expanding civilizations flying around, it was closer to once a year. If I yawned like that, the others would be instinctively shrieking in terror, Frilla smirked. Julian chuckled, knowing she was right. You know, even I don't get how you humans aren't afraid like the rest. Don't get me wrong, I much prefer having someone to hold a normal conversation with, but it is puzzling. We call it pack bonding, Julian replied. Basically, if it doesn't immediately try to kill us, we try to make friends with it. Sounds like a good way to get killed. Julian shrugged. Yet, here we are, and back on Earth we've domesticated just about half the planet. Frilla shook her head in bewilderment. I read about your world, and I'll admit, I can't decide if it's more insane than you tried, or that you've succeeded as many times as you have. Word of you, didn't it? Julian jabbed playfully. Like, what? I have not been charmed by some alien species. Wiles! She protested in the face of Julian's laughter. Julian sighed away his laughs. He wondered when the others would be back. This one was taking a bit longer than usual. This time the ambassadors had learned from the last mission, and made sure to get visual ID on the new species, who had named themselves Hookleo before making first contact. Julian hadn't bothered to check the visualizers himself, It wasn't like he'd be meeting them up close and personal anyways, and he was busy teaching the ropes to Thriller, the stuff the textbooks wouldn't. As it was still humanity's responsibility to make sure they integrated into the GC easily. He'd heard some remark from Kicknick about whether they were sure this actually was a new species, but whether it was or wasn't, him and Thriller wouldn't be the ones finding out. The airlock opened. New ship, same swoop. Vorlak stepped in and addressed them. Alright, they're ready for you two. Remember not to smile with your teeth. Finally! Thriller exclaimed. First contact. Vorlak stepped up beside Julian as they walked. You'll like these ones. They're like humans, but less threatening. Julian was surprised by the comment. Like humans? Vorlak seemed way too at ease for them to be that much like humans. Most likely it was just another biped. Apparently those were rare. Vorlak stopped them halfway to the designated building. Alright, wait here, we'll bring them outside. And off he went. Thriller sighed.
Should it be pinker?
I suppose I wouldn't fit in there anyways. Julian gave her a reassuring pat on the shoulder. Most facilities could barely fit humans when we joined the GC2. Well, of that. That being said, the structures around them did bear a resemblance to human architecture, as far as the height of their doors and placement of windows and door handles. Biped was looking all the more likely. The door to the building ahead opened as Vorlak started his return, with the new species in tow. Thriller began to smile receptively. No teeth, Julian hissed in quick reminder, before he could cause an incident. Thriller stowed her teeth, visibly having to make effort to smile without revealing them, due to the musculature of her jaw. Julian worried his appearance would be even more off-putting than if she just smiled normally. He sighed quietly, and turned his face towards the new species to give his own best smile. But the smile died before it started. A cold spread out from Julian's heart as it began to beat faster. His breathing turned frantic, his skin turned white, and he began to sweat. The Hookleo, those things. Vorlak was right. They looked like humans. Too much like humans. But their skin was too white and dry, bordering on translucent. Their faces looked stretched, their hair too sparse and strand-like. Their arms too long, too thin, and too wiry. And their eyes. By the earth, their eyes. They were black as a void. It was like staring at some twisted thing out of a horror movie. He'd watched horror movies before. He was far from easily frightened, but seeing this thing here in person, and the way it was walking, swaying side to side with its gait, its chest not moving at all, like it wasn't even breathing. His instincts were screaming to run for his life. Thriller noticed as he started to hyperventilate. What's wrong? Are you sick? It's uncanny, was all Julian could muster. It's true. Their resemblance to humans is remarkable. No, you don't understand. It's uncanny. I can't. I have to go back to the ship. What? Why? No, it can't be. Is that the human fear response? That? I'm not scary, but that is. What happened to pack bonding? I can't pack bond with that. Well, it's almost here, so pull yourself together. If you can talk to my species, you can talk to this one. Why is this still getting closer? Julian wondered. They're just supposed to get close enough to see us and stay at a safe distance. Why is this still getting closer? Here he is, Vorlak announced cheerily. The human, practically your sibling, just as described. Indeed it is, the thing said in an almost sing-song voice. It's a pleasure to meet another species that shares such a close appearance to us. I'm sure our people will intermingle splendidly. Don't count on it, Julian thought grimly, sweat dripping off of his brow. What was he going to do? These things were going to join the GC, and humanity was going to lose it in an entirely different way than they had for the dragons. He had to do something. He had to say something, but he was paralyzed. Vorlak continued. The humans eagerly volunteered to guide the Jurosorfinimtimthal here through the galactic community. I'm sure they'd be happy to do the same with your people. No, Julian finally blurted, to all of their surprise, even his own. Dang it, Julian, you're an ambassador. Even if these things are terrible, you have to represent humanity in a good light. He closed his eyes. If you're going to see it, even if he still knew it was there, maybe he could get a grip. I'm sorry, he finally added, but humans will not be able to interact with your species. Vorlak finally seemed to notice Julian's condition, and although he'd never seen a scared human before, he recognized what fear looked like, and if a human was scared, he took a precautionary step back. If Julian had to explain his behavior, he knew he had to. He just had to hope they would all understand. It is nothing against you, it's a human instinct. It's the only thing that all humans fear. Something like that exists? Vorlak blurted. Yes, Julian continued. And it's things that look very close to us, but it's not us. We call them uncanny. Oh, thanks, Santu, came the sing-songy voice. eliciting a "what?" from all three diplomats. Julian even haphazardly opening one eye again to ensure it was the new species talking. It was. To be mercifully honest, it continued, you look unbearably ugly. I've been holding my lunch ever since I got a good look at you, and I was dreading to think we'd have to interact with your kind on a regular basis. I didn't think I could say anything without causing an incident. Julian was just dumbstruck enough that his heart started to slow down to a reasonable rate. You think I'm ugly? Yes. Please, would it make no insult if I look away? No, by all means, please look away. The Hookleo turned away and shielded its eyes. Ah, at last. The both of them started to breathe easier. It seemed his lack of visible breath before it had been due to it being just as racked as Julian had been. It seems we will have a mutual understanding, Julian gave with a half-nervous laugh. It does. I will refrain from shaking your hand as I dread what your visibly oily skin must feel like. No hard feelings here. Your fingers are way too long for my liking. The grateful exchange of insults in the successful mission of First Contact will go down in the history books as yet another unbelievable instance of human interaction.
Oh no.
Mutually appreciated aversion, it was deemed, with the uncanny valley and the small uglies being cited as both sides' reason for it. And while many in the GC couldn't understand why two species so close in appearance would avoid each other, they could accept it. Though Julian's life was certainly going to be just a bit more challenging from now on. Maybe one day he'd get used to the Hookleo ambassador's appearance, but until then, it certainly would be an interesting next few First Contact missions. Was there really a necessity of a human ambassador on First Contact missions? This was the question that members of the galactic community had once asked. With the success of the First Contact mission to the Duros Volenthinthal, this question had been answered in the affirmative. Were it not for the presence of a human, none of the other 23 ambassadors would have had success in introducing the GC to the species nicknamed dragons. Humans were necessary because they were fearless. Or so the GC had thought. It was the very next mission where the human ambassador encountered the Hookleo, a race uncannily similar to theirs, and proved humans were capable of fear. That fear, and the shared but different aversion the Hookleo had towards them, was once again raising the question, as their inability to look in each other's general direction and share a workspace was posing new challenges to displaying the GC as a unified and accepting organization. If this next First Contact mission didn't go smoothly, it could very well be human ambassador Julian Rush's job on the line. Even with the Hookleo aboard and having to wait out 2/3 of each mission, Julian loved his job, and considered many of the other ambassadors his friends, especially Frilla, the Dragon Ambassador, and fellow Death Warder.
Where's the arm?
His instinct,
It's over there,
showing
okay.
a shred of disquiet towards the Hookleo was what it would take to keep his job. By the earth, he'd do it. This next species made the 27th. By now, the dragons and the Hookleo were both well integrated into the
Oh dear.
GC, and Frilla was a startling natural at appearing less threatening once she had the practice, having a technique of moving with a soft grace, an equally soft touch of her foul, dull claws, and perfecting her toothless smile. Julian was as rigid as ever, courtesy of being a biped, but at least he had the same smile. The ship touched down in the dense forest of this newest species world. The trees rivaled the sequoia redwoods back on Earth. These ones covered the whole planet according to the visualizers. This one wasn't a death world, but it had been close. Apparently this planet has some nasty storms and more than one predator. But all that meant was that Julian and Frilla would be staying behind, so as not to remind the natives of those predators. The species that they were making first contact with were another rare case that had managed to send the GC a message first, naming themselves Voodoo. It also included depictions of them. They looked almost like teddy bears. Small, thick black fur, no visible natural weapons, and the biggest difference of eyes on the side of their head, like a periscope. All the telltale signs of a non-predator species, they were fleeing terror at the sight of Julian and Frilla. As the ambassadors fired off the ship, the semi-rigid water species ambassador, named Fila, led the way, having been promoted by seniority when Vorlak retired. The similarity in her and Frilla and Anbitar's nickname had caused most to simply use Frilla's full name, despite the difficulty it posed. But Julian had insisted he wouldn't mix the two up. When asked how, he proudly replied, "Because fly is ply, and it's dragons who fry." The homophone only made sense in the human language, and Frilla had reminded him yet again that her species did not breathe fire like dragons in human mythology. Regardless, he preferred Frilla. Julian leaned back and settled in for the long wait. He glanced over at Frilla. "You filed your claws down." I did. What of it? I thought sharp claws were a matter of pride for your people. So is doing your job well. But a dull claw is much more approachable than a sharp one, even for your kind. A shame. They were very nice claws. They look good on you. Frilla's neck twisted in an expression of suspicion. Julian, you're not flirting, are you? I've heard tales of what you humans call bards. What? No, no. Julian bolted up in his seat. That would be unprofessional. I meant... But his protests were drowned out by Frilla's laughter. She'd gotten him this time. Your sympathy for my claws is noted, she gave with a nod of appreciation. Time passed. Normally Julian would have passed the time with his holophone, but for some reason he couldn't shake a nagging feeling in the back of his head, and his eyes kept drifting to the permanently dark landscape under the thick canopy of trees. A lingering fear of the dark, he thought. But no, this wasn't fear. It was something different. Something whose existence was debated on even by other humans. Frilla, have you ever heard of the sixth sense? Sixth sense? Of course. I believe the Glors have 8 senses in total. No, not that kind. I mean the human sixth sense. Humans have a sixth sense? Julian recognized the angle of her head that indicated curiosity. Well, not exactly. It's more of a superstition. It's a belief that when something is wrong, something just out of sight, we can feel it deep down. And this is a feeling you are having right now? Frilla asked tentatively. Julian was stunned as he stared at the darkness beyond the light of the ship's shed. I don't know. But then he finally saw it. Something didn't match the solid darkness in the bark of trees. There was a very perceptible discoloration in it just ahead of the ship. Had he been noticing it all along in his subconscious? But I'm going to find out. He stood up and started for the airlock as Frilla took on a shocked arch in her neck. What? You're going out there on your own on a first contact mission? That's completely breaching procedure. It'll cost your job. Julian stopped, airlock hanging open. She was right. And yet... I have to check. I won't go far. He stepped out and turned his holophone to illumination mode, turning it into the equivalent of a lantern. A thud on the ground behind told him Frilla followed him. Are you planning to stop me? He asked, a bit taken aback. Even with her filed claws, he didn't think he'd win that fight. No. I'm not letting you get caught breaching protocol alone. If I'm there too, they might at least be lenient. Write it off as a death order thing rather than a human thing. She lifted her head up to increase her size, a dragon sign that they wouldn't be moved from their decision. Whatever happened to valuing doing your job well? Julian asked, but he was more than grateful to her. My people also value loyalty, she stressed, making her point clear. Julian nodded his appreciation. It was convenient that humans could arch their necks in an imitation of many of the dragon's expressions. The two walked into the forest, where Julian had seen the discoloration. He approached it cautiously, and as the holophone light shined on it, his first reaction was surprise. It was a ship. He examined it more closely. It didn't bear a resemblance to any of the GC ship designs he knew. It had a symbol on the side, and what appeared to be writing, but the translator wasn't giving a written translation. Whoever ship this was, they weren't in the GC. Do you think it belongs to the Voodoo? Julian asked. No, I can see the cockpit. The seat is too big for the images we saw of them. Julian examined more of the ship, looking for a way in. It's overgrown. He started to get that feeling again, that sixth sense. He turned around to face the darkness, and he caught a glint in the darkness. He slowly approached. It was another ship, just as foreign as the first. And there, another ship. And there, another. Abandoned and overgrown crafts hidden below the canopy. This isn't the Voodoo's first contact with other species. They lied. This was a trap. We have to get to the others. Wait, shouted Frilla. Do you feel that? The sixth sense? I don't think I need... No! The eyes! As she said it, the forest almost felt like it quietened. And now that Julian was thinking about the forest, he could feel them. The hair on the back of his neck stood on end, as he could have sworn he could feel predatory eyes studying them. This isn't a sixth sense, Frilla growled. This is death order instinct. What do you think they're waiting for? Same thing all predators wait for. A weak spot. A lapse in awareness. A lagging member of their own. We may have them worried. They may never have seen death orders before. Well, if they're going to wait, we won't, Julian decided. We're finding the others. He started in the direction the other ambassadors had left. Frilla was right behind him, surveying their surroundings with a glare that might have killed any of the ambassadors from heart attack. It took longer than Julian would have liked, but they found a log cabin, though it may have in reality been a branch cabin with the size of these trees. Julian was about to kick the small door in, but he froze. What if he'd gotten it all wrong, and he was about to kick the door in on peaceful diplomacy like some rampaging monster? No. No, he'd seen the ships. The others were in danger. He kicked in the door, and almost fell straight into the pit on the other side. Julian, Frilla, run. They were just here. They could be back at any moment, and they have terrible weapons. The voice came. It was Nickname's voice. Julian looked down towards it and saw how the floor had been rigged to fall some 15 feet, and the ambassadors were at the bottom of it. He looked at the walls of the pit. They were a straight drop, but they weren't slicked, and the massive tree root systems didn't allow a dense packing of dirt and stones. He could probably climb out by digging his own ladder. He jumped down and did his best to roll to avoid a hard impact. It wasn't perfect. He'd be bruised tomorrow, but what would bruise a human could be life-threatening to some other species. Sure enough, they were injured in the pit. Broken appendages, bent antennae, smashed torques. But everyone looked alive except... What are you doing? Nickname protested. Are you trapped down here with us? No, I'm not. Where's Phila? He asked. The water-based captain, the most fragile of them all. Evaporation itself was a threat to her life. Nickname pointed. Her atmospheric regulator had been pushed into one of the corners. Julian hadn't seen it because one of the other ambassadors was crashed over it. Her power regulator cracked when we dropped. Cicadel has been showing power from his respirator, but... Julian's eyes narrowed viciously, and then they took an instinctive step back. We're getting out of here, Julian stated, with all the certainty that the sun would rise. How? Maybe you can get out, but we can't, Nickname cried, literally, with all 12 eyes. Julian moved to one of the fallen sections of floor and hoisted it off the ground. What's our status? He called to Frilla. They're still keeping a distance for now. I think we really scared them. Julian grunted with effort as he propped the floor segment against the pit wall, making a ramp. But it was too steep still for those without strong appendages, so he took a step back, lifted his leg, and stomped it down into the wood. It splintered with a crack that made some of the ambassadors gasp in shock. Perhaps they had thought it was Julian's leg that had sat, but no. With one more stomp, his foot went through the wood, making a foothold. He repeated the process again, then again, using the holes he'd made as platforms to make the next one from, building a ladder with force of strength and adrenaline alone, as the others stood with mouths agape. Most of them had never actually seen what a human was capable of. Now start climbing, Julian shouted, as the last hole was made. Whether it was to escape the pit or obey the terrifying shouting human, they made no hesitation. Julian helped lift each of them up at the top of the ladder. When the Hooklium ambassador came next, he registered the uncanny appearance and made no delay to take hold of his long-fingered hand and help him up as well. Once the majority were up, Julian slipped back down, hoisted Philo and Cicradal both in his arms, much to their terror, and ascended the ladder with them. Philo's atmospheric regulator alone weighed close to 200 pounds, Julian knew, so he was well aware adrenaline was fueling him to hysterical strength. Don't run for the ship. Stay with Frilla and me the whole way, Julian barked. The ambassadors were a herd of defenseless sheep now, and he and Frilla were the shepherd dogs that would keep the wolves away. They started back to the ship, but it was slow going with some of the injuries. My battery is almost out, Cicladal warned. And at this rate, either Frilla and I won't make it. Leave behind. Take my battery. No, Julian barked again. Nobody is getting left behind, and nobody is running out of battery. Once again, he hoisted the two of them, but this time he deposited them on Frilla's back. What are you doing? I'm not a pack animal, she protested in surprise. Julian grunted. Of course not. Only the noblest of dragons in Myth can be on their back, and that's what you're going to have to do to get these two to the ship on time.
Hi, baby.
Are you insane? That's exactly what the voodoo have been waiting for. If I leave, they'll see it as a weakened pack and attack. Good. Frilla's eyes widened, a rare expression of fear. You have gone insane. No, Julian disagreed. I'm furious. Frilla tried to say something in response, but she couldn't find any words. Looking him once up and down, seeing the tight fist Julian's hands made, as dense as any glove, she nodded. All right. As she ran for the ship, calling out behind her, I'm still not one of your mythical human dragons. With only Julian left, the eyes that had been following them began to descend from the trees. They didn't have a mouth visible. Perhaps it was buried under all that fur, but the voodoo made a chittering sound, very unlike a teddy bear, as they descended with gleaming metal pikes in hand, only as tall as they were, practically sticks to Julian. But whatever those pikes were made of, it wasn't medieval. Surgery brimmed around the edges, and bars of liquor were screwed in to feed into their points. Wherever they come from, just stay together, and keep moving towards the ship. Don't let them turn you around, Julian ordered. And then they attacked. With chittering sounds, they lunged at the group. The first one was face down and lifeless in the ground before an ambassador could scream. One blow to the head from Julian's fist was all it had taken. No doubt it hadn't expected it to move so fast or reach so far. The other voodoo were given pause. At the moment, even another human would be hesitant. Adrenaline was a hell of a drug, and Julian was practically frothing in the mouth of it. Little, spear-holding monsters surrounding him. His instincts were on tilt. Years of suppressed emotions for intensive training and exercises to keep the human timber under control, to ensure nobody ever got hurt in a fit of anger. And dozens of hellbound fights over years of interacting with fragile aliens all came bumbling up. And he had no mercy for those deceiving predators who approached his friends. He actually ran at the next one, catching them completely off guard. His foot connected with it like a football and sent it crunching into a nearby towering tree. It didn't get up. He roared, actually roared, like an actual orc. The voodoo finally recomposed themselves, and this time attacked in unison. Julian swung and kicked relentlessly. They needed to cover double the distance he did to land a blow with their spears, meaning he connected with 1, 2, 3, 4 more, and they hadn't had a chance for one good stab at him yet. He used his legs to dodge attacks as often as he did to get one in the gut and send it sailing, already dead through the air. One jumped for his midsection, and he actually caught it, and in the same swift action he chucked that little gremlin straight into another one that had peeled off to go for one of the ambassadors again. Another one managed to close the distance behind him, and he stabbed his leg with the spear. Julian shouted as electricity and stinging poison alike hit his nerves, and the gremlins cheered. But then Julian turned and punched the one that had stabbed him, eliciting an audible gasp from the assembled creatures. It was clear they thought one stab would be the end of it. The truth was, it may as well have been a joy buzzer and a bee sting. Their weapons weren't designed with a death runner in mind. The next fist that landed broke them out of their stupor, and it finally dawned on them just what these little monsters were up against. A real monster. They cried out in panic and fled in every direction. And never try it again, he shouted after them, breathing heavily. As Julian walked back to the ambassadors, they looked absolutely frozen horrified. Nigbig spoke up. You just killed 23 of them with your bare hands. If a sign-up Tory counted it, Julian knew it had to be accurate. He hadn't been counting himself. Nigbig continued when Julian said nothing. I knew that humans were supposed to be strong and volatile, but that was just slaughter. And you all survived, Julian gave with a relieved grin. He knew he'd have just as many nightmares about little monsters with spears as the ambassadors would surely have about him. And he made it back to the ship, where Thriller, a Cyclops, were waiting. Thriller came out to Julian. We heard a roar, like a vicious animal from my homeworld. That was you, wasn't it? He killed 23 of them with his bare hands and feet, they cried out, answering for him. 23, she echoed. I'm sure I could have killed that many myself with my claws weren't dull. But what defending the others? How did you do it? Let's just say humans are fast. We make our own stimulants, adrenaline, Julian retorted. I always regret not getting to see it in action, Thriller muttered. Dead Morris, Nigbig muttered in dismay under his breath, like a curse. Speaking of adrenaline, Julian's was running out. He swayed on his feet for a moment and winced as searing pain suddenly appeared in his lower leg. You hurt!
What's wrong, Gracie? Come here.
Darting to catch Julian before he fell. It's fine, it was practically a pencil stamp. Ugh! He tried to put his weight on the wounded leg again, but even though that poison wasn't lethal, now that the adrenaline was gone, it was painful. Come on, hero, Thriller remarked. She shifted his body to get him onto her back, then started for the airlock. I thought you said you weren't one of those mythical human dragons. And I thought you said you weren't flirting, Mr. Noblest of Dragons. Alright, fine. Maybe I was a little. Humans do crazy things when we get on an adrenaline rush. That wasn't when it started and you know it. Besides, I for one think it wouldn't be so bad to see your crazy side more often. Julian blinked, processing what exactly Thriller had just said. When the report came in of the only failed first contact mission to date, the GC was done. Their first question was whether it was the humans' fault. The immediate and resounding response was, no! Do not ever remove the humans from the first contact missions. We implore you. They are absolutely necessary.
Okay. Is this? Yeah, this is not drinking water. Okay. I'll rinse this out.
Excuse me, can I get a tampon? Oh, sure.
She deserves an upgrade to the Tampax Radiant.
With Tampax Pocket Radiant, you get up to 100% leak and odor-free periods. It's full-size protection that's comfortably compact. It's time for an upgrade. Tampax Pocket Radiant.
Entry 1. The delegation will meet for the first time today. I'm keeping this record as ordered, though. I don't see the point. The humans aren't exactly reclusive, but the hoops they made themselves jump through before they even returned our first contact message were absurd. I heard secondhand that they nearly went into a civil war over the possibility of a message being bait for some sort of trap. Are they just naturally paranoid? Or have they run into some other species of non-humans that gave them trouble? I rather suspect the former. Their military, for just having one star system, is pretty numerous. Entry 2. The humans set up some civilian diplomat instead of a military leader. I was surprised. They seem to value martial prowess fairly highly, so why do they have a civilian leader? Apparently this guy was selected after a brief voting period, which wasn't made open to the general population, but was only open to national leaders. That's troubling. National leaders in a spacefaring species? That can only mean delays in the future. Entry 3. A few more diplomats came up today with huge stacks of portable computers. Our translators already added the one language they have used so far to the universal system, so we didn't have any trouble deciphering the data from the computers. Apparently they want to know as much as possible about us, and in exchange they provided a bunch of information about themselves, their history, some more language dialects we didn't have covered yet, and some of their own star maps. I was stunned. Why are they being so trusting? They were on the verge of a civil war when we contacted them. No. It was because we contacted them. Entry 4. I know it's been several weeks since I last updated this list, but the humans data has taken up all of my time. Apparently they have been in a state of what we would consider constant civil war since their people evolved far enough to grasp fire. Over the dumbest things too, from religion to territory. Nearly a fifth of all their most important technology, including their fire technology, was derived from something designed to kill other humans. No wonder they're being so angry. Our people wouldn't engage in an internal war on the scale these humans have ever. They've killed more of themselves in the last 1,000 years than my people have ever died. Total. Entry 5. The 9th week of the contract meeting is ending now. The reactions from the humans on their worlds have been more interesting than all the data they gave us. By now, they're starting to get back to routine. They have their own planet, another planet, and about 5 moons in their system colonized to some degree, and each has a distinct culture and way of life. The reaction on each when we made contact was the same. They flipped out, and their peoples were seized by everything ranging from panic to joy. But now, their reactions have stabilized to the extent that I don't think we're going to get a reaction out of them unless we create some further provocation. The most direct news articles on their electronic communications networks are more about domestic problems and entertainment and their economists than they are about us. Are humans just more comfortable with routines, or are they frustrated while lacking the humans aren't messy, but I know the ambassador of our people is getting worried.
3.
Entry 6. I'm relieved. The human ambassador met me personally, today, informally, here on the ship. He said that he could tell that I was getting worried about the negotiations, and he wanted to address me personally. I asked how he could tell I was worried, when he had only met our species for the first time less than 100 solar cycles ago. And he replied that it was all part of being a diplomat. I stated outright that I was confused by the seemingly lack of disruption on the part of the people below. He said that there were plenty of people who were disrupted, but that most of the humans in the system had already decided to wait and see what the outcome of the negotiations were. After he said, even if my species becomes a member of the galactic community, most humans will stay right here, living their lives. will be affected by galactic politics, new technology and colonization, even assuming that we could find new Earth-type worlds out there. But most will want to stay right where they are. I asked him how he could say that when so many of his people had colonized the rest of the system, and he laughed. I think it's completely different when you can see Earth out of your window. Entry 7. Things have picked up so much. We got our translators working to the effect that nuance of speech, not just content, can be translated appropriately.
Oh
The
shit.
human ambassador's speech and conversation were suddenly so much clearer. To his credit, he told us that he had been refraining from common speech, slang, and aphorism as much as possible. I wouldn't want to use a saying or phrase that had a clear meaning to another human but made no sense, or worse, insulted one of your people. Now I can speak freely. I have to wonder if this faster-paced dialogue will negatively affect the negotiations. The ambassador broached the toughest topic today: faster than light travel. Entry 8. Generally, species are content to create FTL on their own, before they even contact us or vice versa. Humans are the exception. They colonize their entire star system with 7 inhabited bodies, and over 1,000 mined, explored, probed, or mapped bodies with no habitation in their systems. So much of their population lives in their orbital platforms that their own homeworld barely even supports 2/3 of their species. They did this without FTL. Clearly, the fact that they have reacted peacefully to our presence, rather than precipitously fighting or ignoring us, indicates that they are mature enough to handle faster than light travel. But I am privately concerned. One of the human diplomats has already begun copying our speech and movement patterns. I found myself opening up to him without even realizing it until afterwards. He must be doing it on purpose to set us at ease. After 120 of their days, they're copying the behavior of their first alien contact. This is one of their finest diplomatic minds, of course, but still, if they can do it with behavior, can they do it with technology? I suspect they will ask for a working FTL drive to study in their next meeting. Entry 9. I am vindicated, it seems. I spoke my concerns to the ambassador today, and he agreed that there will be no gifting of FTL technology to the humans, that they would have to earn it on their own. The humans would react poorly, I guess, but tactfully, as at least a few of them seem to genuinely care what we think. I was right, naturally. The human ambassador asked that their people be given a working FTL drive to reverse engineer in exchange for an unspecified piece of technology of theirs. Their technology, the ambassador replied quickly, was inferior to ours in every way save communications, and we had no need for their communications technology. Communicating faster than light is something we can do already. Communicating instantaneously anywhere in their system, as they do, is a wondrous piece of technology, but not necessary for our people. The human ambassador reacted with shock and surprise immediately, and then quickly became suspicious. I think he may have gleaned that we had discussed this amongst ourselves. How, I cannot guess. We spoke of other things,
I think
and
we're
the
gonna go
ambassador
with
of the
blue and
human
purple for
seemed
this.
mollified by the discussions that followed. Will he broach it again? Probably. Entry 10. The humans surprise us. It is exactly half of 1 year after first contact, and life, as I before noted, continues. They are fully
where
one-third
did it
finished
go?
with another of their orbital habitation platforms, and we were given a tour of the construction site. Huge robotic construction devices smelt down chunks of ore from the many, many asteroid and lunar mining platforms the humans have throughout their system. Ferried to them by relativistic dry-powered ore haulers, the slag is then forges and reduced to elemental purity, and refined ore is then crafted, still in space, into modules, which are then attached to the frame of the space installation. The elemental slag is mostly hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and silicon in this system. They use these things to make air and computers, apparently, which are then used in the construction of their platforms. I am outstanding. They have created the most efficient industrial complex we have ever seen, by necessity. They lack FTL, so in the absence of easily reachable resource deposits that they can mine on their colonies, they simply process asteroids into something useful. Another reason to deprive them of FTL? Steady prospering to their curiosity. Can't they react to plenty? Entry 11. Disaster. The probe the humans use to direct the ores they extract from their asteroid belts slammed into our ship today. Our force was held, but the drone was wrecked and the asteroid deflected towards Earth. It now moves only a few times faster than the speed of sound, leisurely by space travel standards, but it is colossal. It will depopulate the part of the planet it hits, surely. I am told that the probes and ore haulers use a computer guidance system to slip into Earth orbital slots with their payloads, where the ores are removed by the pace and need that a human construction schedule dictates. If we had not been in the path of these probes, this would have never happened. The humans provided us with a copy of the ore hauler's schedules to avoid just such a calamity. How did this happen? What will happen to Earth? Entry 12. We have come to a conclusion. The crew and diplomatic staff have decided that we will divert the asteroid into the Earth's sun, using our own ship to provide the stopping mechanism. Our fuels are not recharged, the impact will kill us. We are not committing lightly. Fully half the crew said that we should abandon the humans to their fate and continue on negotiating. Some of the rest said that we should do all that we can without destroying ourselves, but I and the ambassador disagree. We did this. Our misgivings about their technological level aside, the humans should not be driven to near extinction by their own first contact. Entry 12. Addendum. Bizarrely enough, all is well. The asteroid nearly hit the planet when the humans took matters into their own hands. We had maneuvered our ship into the path of the asteroid, ready to deflect the massive thing with our own ship if need be. We did this was our fault. Except the human diplomats were frantic, demanding that we move the ship at once. We were baffled. We were offering to solve the problem we had caused, so why were the humans demanding that we did not? They beseeched us to move, to let the asteroid move along its own path directly towards the planet, saying that we did not deserve to suffer, to bear the brunt of this calamity. Finally, we gave in and moved out of the course of the asteroid. We were watching what we thought would be the end of the Earth below, but we were wrong. A blast appeared near the asteroid, and we realized what was happening. The humans had detonated a nuclear device in the asteroid's path to divert it. Not destroy it, but divert it. A few dozen of their own drone craft slammed into the side of the asteroid, which had just been hit by the bomb, propelling it into near-Earth orbit. The human ambassador actually took me aside and explained that they had a contingency set aside for just such a catastrophe, dating back to when they had first created the mining drone and ore hauler network. He told me that the technology they had first employed to create the interplanetary ore haulers had originally been far more primitive and unable to precisely calculate the appropriate course and speed to get the asteroid safely back to Earth. The asteroid division weapons and drones had been created to reduce any risk. In total shock, I asked why they had done this, and almost as importantly, why they had been willing to risk such a mining venture if they knew such a potential problem existed. Necessity is the mother of invention, he replied. Entry 13. 50 days have passed since the asteroid incident, and the humans' reaction has been alarming. Civilian populations and not a few military across the system are clamoring for attention, some demanding that the human diplomats apologize for what they have done, as if the humans caused this. Others demanding that we suffer for this transgression, others yet launching into wild speculation. Above it all, the human ambassador has changed the tack of these negotiations completely. Now all he seems to ask about is the justice systems of the galaxy, where before he has inquired about everything from laws restricting invasive plant species in agriculture, the FDL drives, the origins of our linguistic colloquialisms. When asked what his official stance about the asteroid incident will be, by other members of his own species who are not part of his delegation, he replies cryptically, "Patience is a virtue. Never close doors you cannot open. Invite no conflict where none exists. Yellow is most flavorful." I have no idea what the last one means. Perhaps our translators are not as capable of translating euphemisms as we thought. Regarding the possession of the nuclear devices they employed to divert the asteroid, he has hastened, quite uninvited, to assure us that it had been over a century and a half since any nuclear device was used in war. This assuages my fears somewhat, especially since we discreetly scanned the complex on the planet's surface that launched the nuke, and found that even the most powerful of these devices is little more than 6 times the effective power of the ones they employed. Strong enough to damage our field, surely, but nowhere near enough to destroy us outright. But I should not be thinking of these potential new friends as potential new enemies, as he himself says. Entry 14. Again, I am amazed by the human's ability to ignore trouble. It is now 250 days after first contact, and the human media has actually greatly reduced their mention of us and the asteroid incident. They are now beginning to return to what I am told, with vast disgust, interestingly, by the human ambassador, is the norm for their media. Music, banal daily news, and what I think may be some form of medical treatment aimed at those who suffer reproductive isolation. The fact that, in less than a year, the human species has been exposed to alien life and nearly been wiped out by the carelessness of said life seems to have been absorbed by the population with a genuinely amazing degree of blasé acceptance. I understand we will be going on a tour of Earth itself, tomorrow though, in full bodysuits naturally. We will have to be. Their atmosphere is breathable, of course, but their sun is so much more radioactive than ours in the spectrum of ultraviolet and radio that to not wear suits would be downright stupid.
There's my garbage can.
15.
Motherfucker.
What in the world are these humans doing without their own FTL drives? I returned from a 10-day tour of their homeworld today, and I can say with certainty that I have never been more unnerved. These humans possess, massive space stations, tightly packed with their own, and their non-Earth colonies were barely at the level where abundant food could be harvested. I have made, naturally, the same assumption that the ambassador did when we saw these
Where's my
places, that these were criminals being made to suffer, or volunteers who chose to live in these awful conditions because they literally had no choice, or the infirm and weak, who could be sheltered in a completely artificial environment because their home world was too harsh for them in some way. What I discovered is that Earth is, if anything, nearly as badly overpopulated in its capitals and trade hubs as it is in their colonies and space stations. I saw towers of apartments, some with over 2,000 people living in them, stacked so close together they looked like rows of molecules in a crystal. And the people there seemed as if this was the norm. The leaders and visionaries and great speakers of humanity spoke and fetted and recited prepared lines, but I heard none of it. These people are not a people in true squalor. Not really. Certainly not by their own standards. But I hear tell of truly shocking scenes in the cities of the poorest continents. There seems a disparity of wealth and power exists here, and I am unnerved. Deeply. A population this large achieving the great works of their peoples, like the ore haulers and orbital platforms, is not impossible. But only a tiny fraction of their people are wealthy enough to have done it. A small percentage without FTL. Entry 16. I suppose the entry before this must seem quite hysterical. It was not the numbers alone which disturbed me and the others of the delegation. The human ambassador once told me that necessity is the mother of innovation. These people need a means of controlling their population so badly that the first thing some of us did when we returned to privacy was propose that they be given a working FTL drive and the coordinates of a world they could inhabit, and we could not. Of course, the ambassador rejected that foolishness. I approve. What unnerved me so deeply was that the humans seemed to be capable of surviving so much that we could not. I do not, of course, speak of solar radiation. A little extra stellar radiation could be compensated. These, however, are a warlike people. That was my impression when first we met, and my opinion has not wavered. Yet, they coexist in tight groups in most of their population centers. Their colonies were made of a mix of people that their nature states they could not tolerate. And their culture overcomes fractious defies so fast, we nearly kill them off, and then, not 60 days after the event, those who continue to demand that we suffer retribution are labelled openly by their leaders as deluded. If these people had developed FTL drives on their own, we would have met them on the edges of our own territory, I'm sure. We would have met as friends, but we would have met as equals, when we are currently not. I should not be so disturbed by that thought. Yet I am. Entry 17. 270 days gone by. The human ambassador has become more and more reluctant to diverge information about his own people to us, even as he shows us around his homeworld and pours more and more data about his species into our computers for our analysts to devour. He answers every question we ask him, yet he divulges less and less in the way of specifics. Oddly enough, he actually seems far more relaxed in our presence than he was when we met. He showed up in a completely different set of clothing than the type he usually wears today, lacking the odd cloth around his neck. I wonder why. Entry 18. We return to Earth today, and I am far more impressed this time than I let myself be last time. The human ambassador this time took us to what seems to be a site of great importance to his people. A building in one of their largest cities called the UN headquarters. The building, I mean, not the city. We spoke to a panel of 200 human ambassadors, each representing a human nation or extraplanetary colony. We answered questions and had our images captured by their media through a very thick-looking defensive device. When I asked why we were being defended, the human ambassador's aide told me that it was for our own protection for those humans who did not appreciate our presence here as much as they should. I was touched by this, though apparently this is not at all unusual. We spoke to many of these diplomats, and I came away with the feeling that many had wanted to ask far more questions than they had been able to, out of a sense of propriety. Our own ambassador told me that he thought it was to prevent any sort of insult, but I was not sure. Some of the human ambassadors seemed outright angry at our presence, and several were apparently restrained from outbursts only by their peers' angry gestures. I think it has something to do with the nearly groveling request the human chief ambassador gave to us on the very first day, not to even decrypt, let alone translate, a single one of the millions of messages sent to our ship, directly or otherwise, that did not bear his signature. Entry 19. 300 solar days have passed since the humans replied to our communications. We hold meetings on their planet as often as we do in space now. I am pleased by this in all honesty. There is a strange appeal to these people that was simply not there when we first met. One particularly unguarded conversation with a human diplomatic aide produced an interesting result. The young woman said that she and many others were raised on fiction involving humanity playing the defender against unexplained or meaningless alien invasion, or playing the victim of some horrible, incomprehensible force of destruction, and the thought that life beyond their own system would be friendly and share the virtue of self-sacrifice was a vast relief. I had never considered this. Most species in this galaxy, we find, are very open with us immediately, or at least after a very brief period of distrust. These people did not trust us beyond discussion until we had offered our lives to save the planet, yet it seemed that we had achieved more in that act of proposed sacrifice than we had realized. These humans do, however, place too much emphasis on propriety for the sake of propriety. I do hope this woman does not come to reprimand because of our entirely unofficial exchange. The ambassador of the humans has certainly been making more and more of an effort to control what we see and hear of these people, the more time we spend with them. Entry 20. I understand fully now why the human ambassador was trying to restrict our communications. The ship's crew, not part of our diplomatic efforts, have been covertly compiling and translating vast amounts of the messages directed to our ship without our approval. We have been exposed to their indirect communications, of course. We discover them through the presence of their first radio transmissions, after all. And we have tapped their system-wide information networks. But the unauthorized communications directed to us, specifically, have been politely ignored and untranslated, thanks almost entirely to the human ambassador's fervent pleas. The crew of the ship, however, have found that some of the signals contain messages of such hate and vitriol, such murderous rage and terrorized accusations, that had I not spent over 300 local days immersing myself in their culture, I could have mistaken it for a declaration of war. The human ambassador has much to answer for. Entry 21. The human ambassador was confronted over the messages we had received today. I asked him to meet us aboard the ship, not our own ambassador, such as to put him at ease. He met us without his various aides and diplomats, with nobody but him, his second, the ambassador, the ship's captain, and me present. We tried a tactic that I suggested myself, placing transcripts of the communications before him with no comment. He picked them up, curious, and rifled through them, displaying a chemical reaction that drains much of the blood from his face. His second could stand to look at the communiques no more than he. He looked through a few pages before seemingly getting the gist, dropping them on the table and looking at us blankly. Our ambassador asked him what he had to say on behalf of the people who sent the messages, and he replied only after a few seconds of staring at the table. I wish they did not exist. Imagine the room, the three of us, sitting across from two human diplomats who looked so nervous they could have been taken for gravely ill. Not one of us even saying a word. I do not know how long we sat like that. Finally, the ambassador asked the obvious, just to ensure no meaning was lost. The people or the messages? The people, the ambassador replied sadly. People are so afraid of what they're unfamiliar with that they hate it. It's an instinct we should have shared by now. Entry 22. The human ambassador seemed disarmed, even resigned. Why should he not be? He had been caught in the lie of omission. The ship's captain spoke next. Some of these people are threatening violence against the diplomats under my protection. Why should I permit that? The human ambassador's second looked rather sullen at the word permit, but did nothing. The human ambassador acted as if he had not heard. Humans are a tribal creature by nature, and we did not evolve as the pinnacle predator. So we treat cultures we have not experienced, and potential threats we have not faced before, with great skepticism. Why do you think we suddenly allowed you to visit Earth after the incident with the asteroid? You showed a virtue we share, willingness to sacrifice. It's easier to relate to someone who acts like you. Then why did the hateful messages not cease entirely? I asked. The human ambassador shook his head. Because, sir, the human race is a fractious one. We do not think with one mind or share one opinion. Why do you think we still have the United Nations around? The more humans there are in a room, the more inevitable the disagreements are. He actually smiled. It's about the only thing that makes normal human diplomacy bearable. The educated mind likes nothing more than a disagreement. But these messages are not invitations to a debate, I pressed. Some are open messages of hate. And many humans are stupid, the human ambassador replied with disgust. Products of intolerant upbringing or ideology. Suppress them then, the captain said with equal disgust. Never, the human ambassador said with some vigor. All humans of any import agree on this. Everybody has a right to be wrong. Anyway, he said with somewhat less passion, nothing is more attractive to the dispossessed than an officially sanctioned bad idea. Entry 23. 11 lunar cycles, just over 300 local days have passed since I arrived. The humans have given up pressing for FTL drive technology completely now, seeing that it will get them nowhere. We have addressed the humans directly, without a buffer of diplomats at the UN headquarters, or from proxies like the ambassador. We spoke on their interplanetary data network, using their admittedly superior instantaneous broadcaster. The human ambassador has recovered quickly from the shock we gave him, much to his credit. It was, in fact, he who suggested that we address the people directly. He told us people would react best if we broke down our speech to the simplest possible elements, explaining why we made each decision. I thought that that would be interpreted as an insult, but he assured me that if there was one thing that humans resented in unison, it was having people talk as if everybody in the audience understood exactly what was going on. So he told them what the ambassador had told them directly, that we were representatives of a large confederacy of species who agreed to mutual defense in the case of extragalactic invasion, constantly invoked. Refusal of FTL drive technology to those who did not already have it, blessedly a rare concern, and integrating a new species into the galactic community, humanity was one of less than a dozen. The people of Earth were then permitted to ask questions of us directly, screened by a human diplomatic team on Earth, and sent up to us. They ranged from the banal, what's your homeworld called in English, to the probing. From what stemmed your desire to keep us from FTL, to the disturbing, do your people ever invade others? I wonder what USIG could do, but the human ambassador seemed to think it was a success. Entry 24. Only a few days left in our Earth diplomatic exchange. The ambassador of the humans seems to have taken ill. Somehow he has been more and more uncomfortable in his dealings with us, in a physical sense. At the advice of his cohort, we have taken to keeping all our meetings on Earth, so that he does not have to abide by the discomforts of the quick, but rough transit from the surface of the ship. Here he seems more familiar, if not more comfortable. He has explained to me the reason for his sudden change of topic all those days ago, after the asteroid incident. He said that he had wanted to know how our people treated them as criminals, not in punishment for their crimes, but in our leniency to the excused. If someone commits a crime, for instance, that saves another's life, do we let him go? Or punish him fully? Or punish him less? We told them then that generally it depended on the severity of the crime, for some crimes could not be uncommitted. He explained that he had relaxed upon hearing that because it was a value we shared, though not all of the nearly 200 nations on Earth, let alone the 6 colonies, had justice in common. Entry 25. The ambassador worsens now, his health deteriorating. Our meetings last only a few hours, with the rest of our time spent poring over the larger and larger amounts of information his staff have been releasing to us. Information about their militaries mostly, knowledge regarding their capability to adapt to warfare in space. Our talk of extragalactic threats, it seems, has startled several of the species' military leaders, and they wanted to know how much they would have to change if they agreed to be part of our confederation. We took one look at their military history and realized that they would have to retool their entire military from the ground up. Over 9/10 of the armed forces they had available to them were tied to the ground, with most, if the remainder comprising obsolete oceanic navies and aerospace forces that couldn't seriously threaten our escape pods, much less our juggernaut-tier defender ships. One thing that was actually somewhat surprising to me was the data regarding their nuclear weapons. One file stated that at one point, one of the now dissolved nations of their people had possessed a nuclear weapon called Bomb of Kings that could have produced a yield over 200 times that of the bomb that diverted that asteroid. A blast like that could have reduced our diplomatic cruiser to a fine radioactive powder. Yet it seems that all such weapons were decommissioned and turned into power plant fuel decades before our first contact. What was surprising to me was that these very warlike people could have displayed the restraint needed to make weapons such as that and not use them. There were well in excess of 24,000 nuclear weapons in humanity's history, detailed in 2 global arms races in 2 centuries. Yet only 2 had been used. Entry 26. 360 days have passed. The human ambassador is dying. Neither their own medical technology nor ours, even if offered, could save him. He is suffering from a massive systematic organ failure that his staff has privately informed me to be systematic of heavy metal poisoning. I am in shock. How? Why? We've done no such thing to him. The hate-filled messages aimed at us from the surface have not changed in volume or content either. So who has done this? Entry 27. The human ambassador has contacted me privately from his deathbed. Not the ambassador, not the captain. Me. He has told me privately that he knew he had been poisoned when he had taken us on one of our tours of the United Nations, when someone had slipped a poison in his drink. He hadn't figured it out until his doctors had told him roughly what day it had occurred, and had no idea who, specifically, was responsible. He told me to contact the ambassador and captain on his behalf and tell them, and instruct them to tell nobody else. I asked him why I was to keep a secret, and he told me that he wanted us to make a decision. He then broke the connection before I could ask him what he meant. Needless to say, I am apprehensive. The man knows he's been poisoned in the final days of the negotiations, so keeping it quiet when the culprit is unknown I can understand. But why would he distrust the rest of our crew?
Remember how to do this.
Had he suspected us, he would never have told us. Entry 28. The human ambassador is perhaps the boldest being I have ever encountered in all my centuries of life. Surely he could not have planned for every single outcome of this venture. Surely he could not have predicted what we would do. Not now, after less than a year of knowing of our existence, after 40 days of crippling illness. Surely he could not. And yet, here we are. Now on the final day of the conference, he announced, live to the whole species, that he had less than a day to live, and that he knew that one of the diplomats on his trusted staff had poisoned him in the UN. He then cut the 3 of us into the transmission, streaming from the bridge of our ship. I can only thank goodness that we have been in front of life humans beyond the diplomatic corps so infrequently, else they would have seen our shock and horror at the sudden recording. The human ambassador went on to state that he had told the aliens, had told us, that he knew that we were innocent. and that it was time for us to make a decision. Entry 29. He said that if humanity was to become a trusted and valuable member of the galactic community, capable of upholding the responsibility of the Confederate's laws and mutual defenses, that we had to do the same. We had, he said, the means of depopulating Earth right before us, the asteroid we had accidentally diverted towards Earth. He smirked through the drugs and pain, and said that trust was a two-way street. We needed to be able to trust humanity, but humanity needed to trust us. And so I leave it to you, my faraway friends, he managed, to render unto us the just deserts of this betrayal. I am dead, by the hand of one I trusted. You can inflict the punishment of the arbitrary, dropping an asteroid on our entire population, almost certainly killing the one responsible, and demonstrating what humanity has in excess. Or you could not, and demonstrate what I think I see in you. He cut his channel. Entry 30. There we sat, free aliens before the entire human species. I couldn't see them, but I could see their world. An entire planet. 10 billion people, with free aliens controlling them all. Every single one of our communications channels, from radio to data stream, to the instant cast relay we were using to broadcast, was active, with unheard hails from across the solar system. Free aliens and a year of diplomacy to decide the fate of a species. The ambassador broke our frozen state of shock. Choosing his words carefully, he spoke to the instant cast. We have just seen the closest thing to a human leader killed by one of his own aides. This reflects rather poorly on your species' ability to think ahead. You have had two periods in your history when you collected nuclear weapons, in case you might have had to use them. Half of your people live in untenable squalor. The other half travel the planets. He leaned forward, obviously dreading his next words. I have read your history, steeped in blood. Your own ambassador admitted in shame the tens of thousands of communications with which we have been bombarded since we arrived represent a substantial portion of your population and their mindset. Ignorant, fearful, theocratic. You actually have the nerve to make war on yourselves, even as you petition for the ability to spread to other star systems and join our defense against the enemy from beyond the galaxy. He sat back, looking drained. Now, your ambassador, without even so much as warning us, forces us to decide whether or not your people get to exist, or join the Confederacy, even if you do. It is not, to borrow a phrase, what I signed up for. Entry 31. Then he turned to me, and his thoughts must have echoed my own, and the captain's. He looked back at the camera and grinned. Yet, the very person who just entrusted you to us clearly thought that you were worthy of us. He has spoken at length about the virtues we share: compassion for the family, sacrifice when needed, curiosity. He said that nothing we had done or said or shared could have achieved as much as our willingness to divert that asteroid did. He showed us the monuments to progress your people have made. Your people achieved powered flight less than 300 years ago, yet you have colonized 6 bodies in your system, 2 terraformed from little more than rock and methane ice. You show a drive and an adaptability we have never seen before. After less than a year of meetings, when 1 year ago he did not know we existed, your humanity decided that not only were you deserving of our trust, but we were deserving of yours. About your culture and mindset, I know only what I can learn in 1 year. And already, your ambassador chose to think that I knew enough to judge you favorably. The ambassador stood, the camera tracking him. The captain and I joined him. The ambassador faced the instant cast and spoke. He was right. Our greeting lasted a year, humanity. So now, let me welcome you to the galaxy. Entry 32. Life has become rather hectic of late. A new human ambassador has been chosen, and the UN is busy streamlining their voting bodies to make it easier to make decisions on behalf of the species rather than opposing political ideologies. I understand that the process was eased by the discovery of the one responsible for the poisoning of our friend, the former ambassador. He died mere minutes after hearing our decision. I didn't think I would be capable of getting so personally involved in an alien diplomatic affair, but I felt emotionally drained when the diplomat responsible for slipping the poison to the ambassador was caught. Representatives for the other 28 members of the Confederacy that have attained spaceflight have arrived to officially welcome humanity into the greater galaxy, but the UN Security Council was most direct in their demands that our ambassador take point. The negative backlash against the decision to leave the entire species' fate up to the ambassador was disheartening to behold. I understand that entire regions of the planet nearly rose in arms over the human ambassador's choice. I am led to understand that his appointment had not been uncontested, as he was apparently very rich in his own right, and some did not think that he would represent humanity faithfully. I am glad he proved them wrong. Our own ambassador has been the subject of rather angry commentary for the human press of late. Apparently those few moments wherein he looked like he might really drop the asteroid on the planet, and alongside the litany of complaints against humans including theocratic, were enough to convince some elements of humanity that the choice had been a loaded one. More than a few people in our own staff grumble that we have been saddled with an unfair burden, now having the responsibility of leading a foreign race by example, and they are not wrong. Entry 33. Still, I can think of worse men to lead by example than one who has had centuries of experience in diplomatic patience, and made the correct choice given the opportunity to blunt such an apparently threatening species as humanity. As for myself, I have tabled the recommendation that we use one of our freighters to drag the largest asteroid we can to the orbit of Earth, and have it be used to create another of their space platforms, and use that, a truly neutral ground, as the base of operations for further participation in the Confederacy. Certainly the easily preventable death of their previous ambassador helped to convince the new one of the idea's merit. The galaxy is a convoluted place, and the diplomatic tactics embraced by the humans since we met them, poisoning, ultimatums, etc., whether these are the norm or not, will not be greeted with anything even remotely approaching enthusiasm by the rest of the galaxy. But I am confident that, in time, the rest of the Confederacy shall see as we do, that humanity has a place among equals in the defense and enrichment of the spacefaring people. End journal.
Okay, I think I'm done with this for the night. Alright, the other side done, but I'm a little bit tired, so I don't want to do it. Half of it done.
PC put ube and boba in a pie. Oh my. Shop it now.
I'll touch it up.
Cleaning
Not
up
exactly
after this
perfect,
little
but I mean it
guy
gets the
was
job
way
done.
Too much work. So I gave Super Sweeper a shot. The heavy duty dry cloths
12
travel
hours
off
tomorrow.
2
Oh, I
times
want to
the
do 12 hours tomorrow.
This is
Well, I'm not
so
doing
cheap.
12 hours.
Be worth it. Love it or your money back.
I, just gotta sit there and look pretty.
SCP-001.
And I'm good, thank you. But still, just gotta sit there and maybe sweep the floor. It's not a lot of physical, it's just a lot of mental. I'm gonna have to bring something to work on besides the watercolors. I can't really bring this stuff, and I haven't got the clay to finish this. I'm actually looking really forward to finishing the rat head. Shit, you gotta dry. You gotta dry. You gotta dry. You gotta dry. Everybody's gotta dry. I can't. I should be sewing. I gotta pack the rest of the stuff in the morning. I don't have enough mental fortitude for this. What time is it? Oh, it's after midnight. I gotta brush my teeth and go to bed. Alright, thanks for stopping in. I hope you have a survivable evening and a survivable tomorrow as well. I'll have to make a base for you, won't I? Yep, and, where are my cross stitches? I can finish some more pretty swear words. Alright, good night. Bye-bye.